right, good morning. And it's a brand new year. It's the first edition in 2024 of Corporate Governance Platform, brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. I am Funmi Omoburiu. All right, today on the program, we're going to be talking about roles and functions of the company secretary in corporate governance. All right, our guest this morning is Mr. EBERE OKONKWO, FCIS. He's former chairman, ICSAN ABUJA. He's also lead partner, Crest and Waterfalls. Good morning, Mr. OKONKWO.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you for joining us, and Happy New Year to you.
Well, same to you.
All right. With me in the studio is Mr. Kayode Ketefe, FCIS, Head of Research, ICSAN. Good morning, Mr. Ketefe.
Good morning, Funmi. Good morning to you, our guest, Mr. EBERE OKONKWO, FCIS, and all our listeners. Good morning and Happy New Year to you.
All right, Happy New Year to you also, Mr. Ketefe. All right, we're going to take this message and we'll be right back.
The world is constantly evolving into a knowledge-based economy where skills and competencies constitute the lifeblood of public and corporate governance. You therefore need to empower yourself to fit into this new world by gaining basic knowledge and improving your skill set in the governance-focused disciplines. That is why every aspiring as well as practicing professional in governance field needs ICSAN.
ICSAN. What is ICSAN?
ICSAN is a leading statutorily established professional body dedicated to enhancing the status and practice of corporate governance and public administration. ICSAN members are trained as chartered secretaries and administrators.
Who are chartered secretaries and administrators?
Chartered secretaries are high-ranking governance professionals with a broad base of skills, unique amongst other professions. They are trained in law, finance, accounting, administration, strategy development, and corporate governance. In today's world, chartered secretaries and administrators discharge a wide range of duties and responsibilities, including functioning as chairmen of companies, executive directors, non-executive directors, company secretaries, risk managers, compliance managers, board evaluators, and corporate governance evaluators.
That is interesting. How then do I become a chartered secretary and administrator?
Good. Go to the Institute's website, www.icsan.org. You can also visit the National Secretariat of ICSAN at Plot 6, Elephant Cement Way, Alausa, Ikeja, Lagos, to get full information on how to become members. ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
All right, as I said earlier, we're looking at roles and functions of the company secretary in corporate governance. All right, let's begin this way, Mr. OKONKWO. Let's look at the roles a company secretary would normally play in an organization.
Okay. For in our jurisdiction, Nigeria, and of course in much other places in the world, the role of a company secretary is on several broad headings: corporate governance, board meetings, and of course meetings of the company on every level, compliance, record keeping. The company secretary also plays a role as a legal advisor often to the company, and also specifically to the board at different levels, maybe the board as a whole, or also the board at the committee level. The company secretary is also the communicator of the board, and also essentially in at other levels, communicator for the company also. The company secretary is the bulwark of company policies, the person who ensures that company is complying with not just company policies, but also statutory regulations that bind the company or regulate the company in the sector that it is playing. The company secretary has responsibilities also for shareholders' issues, also share administration where this is not outsourced. The company secretary is involved in the whole relationship with shareholders. The company secretary also plays a role in risk management. So on these broad levels, but at a central level, the role of the company secretary is with respect to the board on one side and also to the company as a whole. The company secretary has a role to the board through the chairman and also a role to the company through the CEO or the managing director. The statutes describe the company secretary's responsibility as providing general guidance to the board. The Code of Corporate Governance in Nigeria provides that the company secretary has two dual roles: one functional to the board, and also the other administrative to the company. In explaining this, the functional role to the board is through the chairman, helping the board, providing guidance, providing legal advice, providing compliance advice to the board through the chairman, and also to individual directors. And then administratively also, the company secretary has a huge role providing guidance to the CEO and to the other levels of senior management with respect to compliance with the law. That will be a broad description of the role of the company secretary.
All right, great. Are these same roles the ones stipulated for the company secretary under the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, or are there other additional roles?
So what you take is a broad view. These roles are stipulated in the Code of Corporate Governance. But we know that the position of the company secretary is a statutory provision that is captured also in CAMA, that is the Companies and Allied Matters Act. So the company secretary is an officer of the company. It's not just an employee. He could be an employee, but he's an officer of the company. Stricto sensu is first of all an officer of the company, which means he has responsibilities and liabilities also that flow to his position in the company. So a company will have officers like directors. So the company secretary is considered an officer at the same level as directors of the company. And where things go wrong in a company, even a company secretary has responsibilities and then liabilities also that are attached to the office of the company secretary. That is speaking statutorily by the provisions of CAMA. But again, there have been specific provisions, just like you mentioned, in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance that has stated what are the recommended practices and has stipulated the roles of the company secretary in a company by the provisions of the Code of Corporate Governance in Nigeria. And the roles that I've described to you are same as the ones that are contained in the Code of Corporate Governance.
All right. Now, the company secretary is often referred to as the sounding board on corporate governance. Why is this so?
Well, of course, by virtue of his training, and I'm being very careful because there are company secretaries that are also not trained. For instance, there is no specific requirement for a company secretary of a private company to be specifically trained or to have a specific type of qualification. But for public companies and regulated companies, their company secretaries are required to have been trained specifically with particular skills And one of those skills that a company secretary is required to have, or knowledge that a company secretary is required to have, is knowledge of corporate governance, because corporate governance is at the center of both profitability and sustainability of a company. And the company secretary is referred to as the sounding board of corporate governance because it is assumed that the company secretary knows what the best practices of corporate governance are and is responsible for providing guidance to the board and to the company or the MD, the CEO or top management on what corporate governance requirements are per time. Now, it's called a sounding board also because a company usually focuses on two components, conformance and performance. Performance being all the activities that the company does to meet its financial goals, its strategic financial goals. But then conformance being the step that it takes to remain compliant with relevant statutory provisions. So the company secretary is the one who helps the company to maintain that balance, because the management usually drags the company towards the angle of performance, share price increase, more money, profit. Someone on the board continues to let the company know that we are not just responsible for making money, we are also responsible for complying with statutory requirements and making sure that our company is doing business in the way that it should. The company secretary is that sounding board. The chairman consults the company secretary to say, these steps that we are taking, what implications do they have for the governance of our company? What implications does it have for relevant statutory provisions that are important in our sector? And the company secretary is that voice and the conscience that reminds the company of its responsibility for compliance. That's why the company secretary is called the sounding board for corporate governance. He is the one that provides all of the different scenarios, the implications, the liabilities, the risk that are attaching to different decisions that are made at the company level. So that's why the company secretary is called the sounding board of corporate governance.
Great. Would you say ICSAN training empowers company secretaries to discharge their responsibilities effectively?
Absolutely. I can't find any, and I've been around for quite a while, I can't find any other set of training. You know that the Companies and Allied Matters Act requires that the company secretary of a public company be a person that has a qualification of ICSAN, or I can be a qualified accountant, a qualified chartered secretary, or a qualified legal practitioner. Now, any of these three sets of qualified persons can perform the role of a company secretary. But what I find is that the ICSAN training actually does more. When we were trained as lawyers, we were trained in corporate law, all right? But no one took time to train us on the subject of corporate governance. And it was ICSAN that actually introduced this concept. You know, corporate governance is a fairly, in that sense, a fairly new word. I mean, from the 2000s. But ICSAN's training actually introduces any company secretary to the role of corporate governance, the corporate governance component of corporate law. That's why I think that the ICSAN training is very important. The ICSAN training trains on corporate governance, corporate administration, corporate secretarial practice, and also trains on corporate financial management. So the ICSAN qualified person is actually well-rounded and suited for the role of a company secretary.
Thank you so much, Mr. EBERE OKONKWO, FCIS. Former chairman, ICSAN ABUJA, is also lead partner, Crest and Waterfalls. Thank you for joining us on Corporate Governance Platform this morning.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ketefe. Now, for amendment of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, what would you recommend in relation to the role of the company secretary?
Thank you very, very much for that question. That's a very apt question. So there are quite a number of amendments one will recommend, but time will not permit. So let me just narrow it down to a single recommendation. So I will recommend that the practice of corporate secretary profession should be exclusively reserved for charter secretaries in Nigeria. So at the moment, under section 332 of CAMA, the lawyers, chartered accountant, and lawyers, chartered accountant, and charter secretaries are given the role to be company secretary of a public company. But I want a situation where that role will be exclusively reserved for charter secretaries, who by virtue of their training, by virtue of their orientation, they are the most qualified, the most competent to discharge the function of a public secretary. If you look at a country like India, that profession is reserved only for chartered secretary. So Nigeria can borrow a leaf from that because India is one of the most advanced jurisdictions when it comes to corporate secretarial practice. So it will do a word of good to our corporate governance regime if the practice of corporate secretarial is reserved for charter secretaries. Let me just limit it at that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kadi Ketefe, FCIS, Head of Research, ICSAN. All right, and that's how we'll wrap it up this morning on Corporate Governance Platform, brought to you by the Institute of Charter Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. We'll be back again next week, Wednesday, 10:15 a.m. on a fresh edition. And we'll be glad if you will join us, that time again. I am Funmi Omoburiwu. Happy New Year once again, and enjoy the rest of the day.